entering my train room, and I'm going to talk about lift bridges. I have a very nice lift bridge that I ended up sceening, and I just want to talk a little bit about how I made it, because it is kind of a fun lift bridge to have. Although the first thing I do have to show is, of course, that every single layout absolutely needs a werewolf. So there's my werewolf looking over the whole train area. And I have this lift bridge that we'll talk about a little bit. Here is a bear. I have a longhorn cow here. And I have a guy with a blunderbuss on that side waiting for the train. And an old car, abandoned car that's just rusting. And what you can see is a couple, the hinges that are right there. Here's one. And here is the second hinge. They're all seamed so that they're very hard to see. And as I lift this bridge back and forth, some of the gravel, of course, falls off. And I just vacuumed this up, and then I just add some of the gravel back in here. I do add the glue that I use here for this stuff in here is more 50% white glue or wood glue with 50% water. And here is when I lift the bridge, and they fit together pretty precisely. And it's not a complicated kind of thing, right? As you can see, it's just 3 of these structures that stiffen it up, and it's just sort of a box, right? And then some wires that go for the power of the track. What's important to see, of course, is I put an angle here, and I put in also an angle right here, and that allows me that when I shift it down, it has a smooth connection down here. And the other important thing to do is that between this riser and this riser, I have 2 pieces of wood on this side that will match the inside here and the inside here. And that locks it up. The complication is that wood breathes. So there's a little bit of flex that occurs here as the year goes by. And I have these pieces of balsa that I put on here to raise and lower the bridge throughout the year so that the track stays even. And I'll talk about how I made the track, glued the track down so that it is as smooth as possible. So here it is down, and you can see the car, you can see the trees. It's quite nice. I have a 3-jug band, folks, and a barrel and a dog, just kind of quite nice. And as you come around, there's another set of trees, and I'll just raise it one more time just to sort of show you what this world looks like. It looks like you're in the movie Inception, where part of the world is folding in half. You just have to be very careful about, not the trees that you put on, they don't interfere with other things. And as you can see, it wasn't too hard. I did do the, this is the Lionel harmonica playing set. I did scene it so that I like it a little bit better this way. So yeah, quite nice. I will show you something I did have to do for this layout. And I will show the naked version of this a little bit later. But, trying to make this as smooth as possible. And you can't always do that. So I've had to use this trick down here where you can see a wire that's here. You can see a wire that's there. Just drilled a couple holes and then shoved the wire. And then I twisted the wire onto the the table to keep these down, because even with the glues that I used, and I used liquid nails, there's still some flex that that occurs inside this track. And it didn't occur on that side of the track. This has been nice and smooth. But yeah, sometimes you have to use these little tricks. And then I just use some gray paint instead of the ballast, because that can interfere with things. So, all right, we're now ready to sort of show you the beginnings of this table. This is a picture of the bridge a little bit later stage, and we'll go back to the earlier stage in a minute. But I really wanted to show you that box shape that we talked about. So, and I'm going to be using my cursor here, and you can see that angle that we talked about. And eventually, I put an angle here so that when it comes down, it fits smoothly over these two little tabs. You can see, quick and dirty, I put a little bit of glue and some screws for these two tabs to make them work. This is the other side from outside of the train room. And again, you can see the box. There's a little bit of an empty space here. Definitely an empty space up here. You see the angle. That edge there fits this edge in here, and this outside edge here fits the inside edge of this board. So not complicated to do. You measure the length of this, and you get some 1x2s and 1x4s, and off you go. It's really not that hard. What you do need, however, is some hinges. So here is the bridge installed, and we'll spend a little bit more time on this particular picture. You can see I put a couple risers, and then I put the hinge. I put the risers and the hinge, and it's sitting on top of those two blocks. Now, the challenge is, of course, is to make it as even as possible between these two. And invariably, I started on this side, worked my way all the way around, came back around, and I made it level all the way along the way. And from here to here wasn't perfectly level. So I had to do the best that I could. And you're going to try to do the best that you can to make this flat here and flat here. It may not happen that way. It's probably not going to. So the trick is flexibility, right? Is how do you eventually put the track on here such that it's smooth when it transitions from one side to the next. And you can see I soldered the track on this side, and then I glue it down with liquid nails, and I put a little bit of risers here and there because I know that it's not going to be smooth when it joins up this chunk of the track. And then I use cardboard shapes that I cut out in order to help me make the track as curved as it needs to be in order to join up the two sides. And there's another one that will be coming off here, going off that way. A closer look at this edge down here shows us, what I was challenged is I have this foam dampening material on top of the plywood, and they have to join together smoothly. You can see here I'm using these weights that come from a scuba shop. They're flexible weights, so they're kind of nice, and you can just use them in all sorts of ways. Here is the next picture with the second track. This is the 5-pound version. I just use a piece of wood that I then put the track on. The weights on, and it really allows me to make this continuous. What you'll notice is the track was soldered on this side before the bridge, and it's now soldered on the outside, and it's a continuous piece of track. And it has been glued down using liquid nails and these little risers, right? I'm just trying to make this as smooth as possible. And you can see there's a little bit of a gap down here, and that's okay because it'll be filled with scenery stuff that will lock it into place. So I don't have to worry about that too much. So not particularly complicated, but it is one continuous piece of track. And after all the glue dried, I remove all the joints. What I do is, and painted it green, I take a Dremel, right? And I use a cut wheel and I cut the track across this gap once it's all glued down and it was all soldered down. And I do the same thing on this side. So now it's as close as possible within this layout that this will be a smooth transition from both sides because it was all glued down as one that was soldered together. Okay, the reason that you want to do scenery on a lift bridge is because if you don't, this is what's going to happen: is it will become serve as a flat surface to put schmutz on, and as you're working on other things. So, uh, if you if you do put scenery on your lift bridge, it will it will keep you from doing exactly this kind of mess on it. So how to start the scenery, right? So you can see this layout has grown. I've started putting scenery on the sides here, um, some painting, some trees. And what I did is I put some plaster and some plaster fabric on top of the hinges, right? Just so that the hinges would get hidden on both sides. On that riser kind of disappears under all of this. I don't need to on this side because, of course, it's just a smooth transition. So not particularly complicated. Now, the thing that might worry you is like, oh my God, I'm putting scenery on top of my hinges, but you know what? These are brass. Don't worry about it. If they start squeaking, just add a little bit of oil, pop the rivet out, put a little bit of oil, and they'll be just fine. Right? Just don't be scared. It's brass. Here's an angle, a closer angle from inside the train room. A little too much water for the plaster, which is why I had this shiny look. So I should have made it a little thicker. And here's the same view from outside of the train room looking in. Just a lot of texture that I'm putting into this, into the plaster here that you can see where the arrow is. So here, this is again not particularly complicated, right? It's the problem, the challenge is more the glue, right? So for most of my layout, it's like a third glue, two-thirds water that I sprinkle on. So I take various grasses, I sprinkle them on, and by the way, I put tape on top of the track first before I put all of this grass on top. So normally I would sprinkle it on, then I would spray some water with that glue. So for this, I actually put a layer of glue down first, pretty thick, and then I sprinkle on the various grasses. And I have 4 or 5 grasses that I put on. And then once that's done, I take that same 50% water, 50% glue that we talked about in the original part. And that's what I spray on top of this. And I may have to put a couple layers. The reason that I'm being thicker about all of this is because this is going to have to go up and down, right? And the same thing on this side. I need a little bit of finishing touches here and there. And then I put up these trees. And putting up the trees is a little bit more challenging, right? Because this has got to go up and down. It can't interfere with this mountain that's on the left side here, and it can't interfere with trees that have been planted on the other side. And that's all trial and error. So let me show you the. Oh, I'm sorry. This is another version of closer up look of that same thing, and some touch up paint that I've had to use as I'm putting on trees and various things. So here's the inside view of that same scene. Not particularly complicated, just trees and grasses. These are the normal things that we do for scening our layouts. And here's a close-up version. I really like this cluster of 4 trees. It came out just in a nice way. And then here is the test. Once you've put up your trees, you got to make sure that these trees aren't going to hit either the mountain and or any other trees that I put up on this side of the mountain. Now, this side of the mountain is pretty steep, so they wouldn't have any trees, and it will preclude me from putting up some trees in some locations on the very top. But I really wanted to have this scened layout. Here's a closer look of it, and you can see it comes really close. Some of it even touches some of the branches here. Actually, just sort of brush up along this. Just scissors and trim that off, and it was okay. Now, once I had the trees and the grasses and put on the gravel and everything else on the track, I wanted to put a shack on. And, I wasn't quite sure what shack I could use. This is the Plasticville shack. It's very nice, but it was too big proportionally. And it just, so I tried something else, and I ended up using the ON30 camp cars from Bachman, which generally I haven't liked a whole lot, but because they're a little small, they feel a little small. But this one just fit perfectly, right? So I used this shack. I put it on some sticks in here. I used their steps, and then I added the jug band that we've talked about, the dog and the barrel, and then some paths that lead to the stairs that are on this thing. So, but again, the challenge here is you really got to glue everything down. So either super glue, liquid nails, or lots and lots of um, this washed out kind of 50% white glue, 50% water, right? So all of these things have to stay in place as the bridge goes up and down. Now here's another side view of it as it's evolving. And what I do is I keep adding until something inside of me says that's far enough, right? And it just felt a little bit empty. The next thing I added was an old guy with a blunderbuss sitting on these steps, just looking at the train to be coming by. And here's a far off view look of him just sitting there waiting for the train to come by. And it just wasn't quite enough. So, and I skipped a picture here. I just felt like I needed to add a junked up car that's been rusting. So a look from inside or from outside the train room at this piece of 3D printed material. I think this is Model Tech that made this one. It's quite kind of nice, and it came. This piece came pre-painted, so that was kind of nice. And there's different companies that make these things. Here's from inside the train room. I added some of these boxes and some other 3D printed stuff just to make it look a little bit like a junkyard. And when I stepped back, it kind of worked. I liked it. So I thought I was about done. And what I decided is I needed a bear and a longhorn, which we shown you in our previous video. And here is now that same bridge with everything. You can see the shack, right? It was well enough glued. You got to test it eventually that it doesn't fall off, and maybe it will. It means you just have to add some glue. And it was okay. So it passed the test. Here are the people that are holding up in this folded world. And we're going to show you the longhorn, right? And this longhorn, I put him here, but I had to find a couple places because I had him here before, and he actually hit the side, and his horns just barely, I think I can put a piece of paper between his horns and the scenery on the upper part, right? So you continuously have to test and be willing to chisel things out and repaint and put things new back on. So here's what it looks like when you're done. There's that longhorn. Here's the bear. Some of the scenery that I've added. It's quite nice. Keeps stuff off off of it. And as I mentioned, I had to add those couple wires here and a wire on this side of the track in order to keep these flat enough for the train to run smoothly. The trick is flexibility, right? Give yourself as much flexibility. The wood is going to expand throughout the year, and you want to be able to have adjustments. And don't get frustrated. It's what wood does. All right. Hopefully, you have some ideas and you're enjoying being creative about these things. And go for it.